Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. I figure I'll go ahead and break away and grab one of those games from the knockout semifinals. Yes, semifinals. Yeah, trying to see who's gonna get to the super final. And so I have a Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen game. And let me just check real quick. Something. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I figured I'd go ahead and hop on this. And this is the round 5, game 4 between Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen. And as always, my people that are coming from the Philippines, I'll say mabuhay, kamusta na aking makaibigan, and salamat. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Anybody who is coming from Armenia, I would say vogjuven. And merci for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. And anybody coming from Norway, I would say God Morgan and Tusen Tak. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my video. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for the game. All right, so we got E4, E6. So we have the French defense. We got D4, D5, pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5. So we do have the French defense, the exchange variation. And pretty much as far as black is concerned, or white is concerned with this, they're just trying to play as solidly as possible. And it stays symmetrical for, it depends on, how far you want to stay symmetrical. But, you definitely have some things you can do to kind of break the symmetry and stuff. And we do see that in this game. So we see knight to F3, we see bishop to D6, and we see C4. So automatically, black isn't really going to play C5 because they're going to be just giving away a pawn. So we do see knight come into F6, and we see knight to C3. And Carlsen just goes ahead and just resolves the tension in the center with pawn takes C4. We see bishop takes C4. Now, if we back up, it's not the worst, but if you do castle in this position, you do give white the opportunity to play C5, and it does inconvenience you slightly because now you have to back your bishop up. I mean, you can toss in a check, but I mean, it's just going to get blocked, and then you're going to have to do something about your bishop. So it just kind of gives white a little bit of space. You don't want to allow that, and you definitely don't want to have a situation where pawn takes and you think that you can win a pawn because normally you have like a discovered attack situation going on, but knight taking D5 after bishop to B4, seemingly a discovery, you're going to be looking at knight takes B4, so that's definitely not a blunder you want to make. So backing up, like I said, we did see pawn takes C4. We see bishop takes C4. We got castles. And then we see castles as white. Definitely one of the things in a French exchange you want to do is make sure you get castled quickly because the nature of the situation, the e-file does become open pretty quickly. So you definitely don't want your king hanging around in the center of the board. So we do see knight to C6 and we do see H3. The reason that we're seeing H3, you can create like a loop for your king, but the problem with this particular pawn is it is an isolated pawn. So isolated pawns have to be protected with pieces. And it doesn't have like a friendly pawn, on the side, kind of giving it support. So you do have to make sure that your pieces do not get removed or pinned down. And so bishop to G4 will be really annoying in this particular situation. So we have H6, rook comes to E1, we see A6 and A3. And so as you guys can see, both players just have luft on both sides of the board. Killing the luft game. So we do see bishop to F5. We see knight coming to E5. See, bishop takes E5, pawn takes E5. We got queen taking D1. And then we have knight taking D1. Of course, you have this pawn, protected by this rook. So you definitely don't want to take with the rook here. So the knight comes back to D7. So we see E6. It's a tricky little move. It's a nice little, it's not a throwaway because, you can possibly get your pawn back. So we see pawn takes E6 and then we see bishop to F4. Just throwing a little tickle on this undefended pawn right here. And then we do see the novelty of the game, which is knight to D4. So that's an interesting, situation that you found yourself in. Because now we are pretty much defending the E6 pawn. So, black is kind of, black kind of has an extra pawn at the moment. So we see knight to E3, giving an attack on this bishop, trying to remove one of the defenders of this E6 point. So we do see bishop to D3. Trying again to remove one of the attackers of that. So as you can kind of see, we're kind of doing a seesaw situation right here. So we do see rook A to D1. We do have this bishop hanging, but then, at the same time, this bishop is hanging. So we go ahead and trade those off. Rook takes F4, rook takes D3. And we do see C5 defending this knight right here. So it just kind of looks like, you know, black has just kind of gotten the pawn away from white, and everything is going pretty nice. So we have actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to stop the video and see what move white plays here, go ahead and do so now. All right, cool. So some of you might have noticed that even though this knight is defended, it is the only defender of this pawn. Also, if you can kind of x-ray through this knight is kind of hanging. So one of the best ways, pretty much the only way to take advantage of this position, which Levon Aronian does find in the game, is actually bishop takes e6. And so the whole point is trying to deflect this knight away from, you know, basically blocking this file so that you can get to this knight. So if you found bishop takes e6, congrats. And also this is a check as well. So, you know, something has to be done about this particular move. So knight does take e6, and then now you see rook taking d7. So as you see, white has gotten their pawn back, so everything is everything. We see rook up to f7. You know, it's not bad to trade in this situation because, you know, you do have everything is pretty equal. So we see rook down to d5. You know, white is saying, hey, man, I want to fight for the game. I don't want to just be trading everything down and getting pretty much into nothing. So we see rook to d8. And now this is kind of pressing the issue a little bit. So we do see rook takes d8, knight takes d8, and then we see rook over to d1. We see knight down to e6. We got rook back to d6. We see knight down to d4. Because as you can see, I mean, black is trying to take full advantage of this kind of like little outpost square that they created for themselves. So we see king over to f1. We see knight to b3. We see rook to b6. It's kind of a nifty move, you know, placing a little attack on this undefended knight. And, you know, we see a check on d2, but the king moves a little closer, threatening the knight. So we see knight back to e4. We see f3 because, you know, of course, we saw this rook and this knight, you know, kind of coming into the f2 square. Like I say, it's always tender. So we do see knight back to f6. And then we just see the king starting to creep into the position a little bit. And so as you guys can see, I mean, compared to the black king is all the way back on the back rank. So, you know, the position is just a little bit more active for white. So we see rook over to d7. And then that just like kind of allows, you know, white to continue to improve their position. So we see rook down to d4 with check. We see king takes c5. We see rook to d3. We got knight over to g4. And then we actually do, there's two top moves in the position. There's knight to d7 with check, forking the rook and the king. And then we also have a possibility of going knight takes g4. So in this position, we actually saw the king go down to c4. Now, you know, if you were to capture here, you know, you would see, you know, the h-pawn probably capturing. And then, you know, rook going down to d2. Most logical. I mean, it's on the 7th rank and you're trying to attack some of these backward pawns here. Rook takes b7, rook to c2 with check first. King up to b6, rook takes b2 with check, king takes a6, rook taking g2, and then a4. This is just a possible scenario that you could have saw from that. And as you can see, it's not like it's completely 100% won, but, you know, white does definitely have a nice advantage here. They have this outside pass pawn that they can probably try to, you know, work the way up the board. But like I said, in this position after knight to d7, we do see king to c4. And it is actually in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigns the game. Now, I mean, it is definitely much better for white. You know, knight takes g4 was actually a little bit worse for black. This was actually the best continuation to go through. But, you know, white is up an entire pawn. I mean, I think the thing with Magnus Carlsen is like, I mean, he's a really, really great in-game player. So maybe he could have kind of grinded. I mean, he's good at like turning draws into wins and maybe even coming back when he's in a worse position. So, I mean, I thought maybe he could have played a little bit more, but I mean, I guess he just felt like it's just too strong. Like, you know, Levon is just too strong to try to continue to play forward. But if we were to actually kind of see this get played forward just a little bit, to kind of give you an idea how hard this might be to play, if we pretty much just follow like best play for white and black, we would actually be seeing rook takes f3 with check, or rook takes f3, sorry, just rook takes f3. Because, I mean, if the rook is going to get, I mean, this rook is still on pre. So if we're going to be, you know, trading pieces, you might as well, like I said, go down swinging. But then we would actually see the counter move, rook takes b7. And then we got, rook to f4 with check. King comes down to c3. Be careful not to get yourself forked. You definitely don't want to go down to b3. Knight comes to f6. Rook, knight takes f6. Rook takes f6, and then rook over to a7. And I mean, it is a rook endgame. You're down a pawn. I mean, so maybe there's some chances to kind of draw this, but I mean, it definitely is a little bit harder to play for black. You're going to be able to get rid of this pawn at some point, and then you kind of have some pawns rolling. So, I mean, you definitely do have a nice initiative going on. But if we went back after king to c4, if knight actually just took, on b6 immediately, you would obviously take the rook on d3. And then after king to f7, you probably would see king to d4, king to e6, knight coming to e5, knight to c8, knight down to d3, king over to f3, g3 to try to completely stop all the forward momentum that the king has. Knight down to d6 and then knight to c5. And as you guys can see, these pawns are kind of frozen over here. And these are just like two sample variations that you could possibly see. So this is pretty much, when Magnus Carlsen got to the position he was in, I mean, I'm sure that he was able to see pretty far into both of these different scenarios. And these are pretty much best play. I mean, if you play a little bit differently, I mean, you're just putting yourself in that much of a worse position. So, I think to your average player, even up to pretty strong players, I mean, this is going to still kind of be ambiguous. It's not going to be like obvious that one player is just like completely winning over the other player. But, when the players get to these level that they're at, especially like a Magnus Carlsen or something, he's going to be calculating the position pretty far. And he's going to be like, yeah, this is not something I want to play. Plus, he's played Levon Aronian so many times that he was probably pretty confident that Levon can go ahead and just, like finish this type of a game off. So he just went ahead and just said, that's it. I appreciate everybody very much for coming by. For all of my people in the Philippines, salamat and pa'alam. Everybody else, tusen tak and merci. And I'll see y'all next time.